In the realm where God resided before Earth existed, there was a beautiful, luminous, translucent mist that connected all beings. This mist was like the ocean's water, a life-giving force that everyone shared, breathed, and lived within. It was a luminous, almost transparent substance that flowed through every thought and feeling, binding all beings together in perfect unity. His mist was their shared life force, a transparent, ocean-like substance that bound them together. All thoughts, needs, and emotions flowed through this mist, and the beings were radiant and translucent, with eyes like diamonds, reflecting every color of light. These beings were not like humans. God's beloved partner, Sarai, was uniquely beautiful. She was the very first being he created as his companion. Unlike the other beings, who all shared a similar appearance, Sarai stood apart. God had given her a form that was more curvaceous and statuesque, setting her apart in a way that made her presence especially distinctive. Lucy was the second being God created, serving as his right-hand man. He was entrusted with nearly all of God's powers, though not all, in wisdom, knowing he might misuse them or turn them against God. Among the male beings, Lucy was the most beautiful God had ever created. God had begun a new project that he called Earth. This was not made for the original beings, but was something separate. He had been pondering how to bring this new place into existence, for with all the beings he had created who depended solely on him, it had become somewhat demanding. Therefore, he found a way to separate the mist to form this new being, and he called them humans, and from it, he also formed Earth. As God became deeply involved in creating a new world, Earth, he intended to place a piece of this mist inside each being, giving them individuality and free will. He became so immersed in this project that time passed without him noticing, leaving Sarai longing for the world they had once promised to create together. Sarai noticed that God had grown somewhat distant, so she went to see what had captured his full attention. When she entered, she saw him bent over his workspace, peering intently into something that resembled a microscope. He was so absorbed that he did not even realize she had come in. Sarai lingered quietly, watching for a while to see if he might turn to her, but his focus never wavered. Emotional tension, love and longing collide. Soft white light fills the chamber. Sarai steps closer. The mist ripples with her words. God turns slowly, his face glowing, but weary from concentration. You promised we would create a world together, yet you are lost in this new project. God turned to her and tried to reassure her, saying,
Sarai, this is something new and different. Once I am done, we will have our own time.
But Sarai felt that she had waited long enough.
You've been telling me the same thing for so long, yet every time it changes. Always something new, always something different. I can't help but wonder. Maybe you've lost interest in me. Maybe the promises you made don't matter anymore.
God turns to her, crossing the space between them with a tender urgency.
No, Sarai. Don't ever believe that. My love for you is unshakable. You are everything to me. But this is unlike anything I've ever created. It will be magnificent. And when it's complete, I'll show you. It won't just be mine, it will be ours. A new world for us to share.
Together? We didn't do this together. You did this alone. And this is not what I asked for. You said we would make our own world together. That we would create life drawn from our very essence. And yet I'm only now learning of this new project.
God sets aside his work, turning to her with urgency, his tone pleading.
You're absolutely right, my love. But I promise, just trust me, please. Once I finish this project, we will create anything you desire.
Sarai studies him, but doubt lingers in her eyes. She doesn't believe him. Still, she nods faintly, agreeing only to end the conversation. Deep down, she already knows, once he is locked in on a project, there is no stopping him. God turns back, continuing his work on the new project. The mist no longer hums with harmony. There is unease, whispers moving through what was once unity. Beings drift uncertainly through the glowing ocean of mist. Their lights flicker faintly, as though troubled. Ripples of unrest carry across the realm. As God became more absorbed in his new project, the other beings began to notice his absence. They called out to him, but there was no response. In the past, whenever a being felt an emotion or carried a concern, God could sense it instantly and respond without delay. But now, with his attention fixed elsewhere, he no longer noticed the signals rising through the mist. The mist itself seemed to shift uneasily, carrying waves of unrest. Whispers of worry and frustration pulsed through it, like ripples spreading across still water disturbed. Lucy emerges into the rippling haze, standing tall as he listens to the undercurrent of doubt moving through the mist. A hidden ambition wakes. Lucy could feel the weight of their unease pressing against him, the mist heavy with questions left unanswered. Drawn by this turbulence, he went to see what had caused the unrest. When he arrived, he found God wholly consumed by his work, hunched in focus. The holy light of his presence glowed, yet he did not even notice Lucy standing there. Lucy hesitated. The air felt taut, as if the mist itself held its breath. He chose not to interrupt, quietly stepping back until he vanished again into the shifting haze. Lucy's eyes, shifting from awe to pride, then narrowing with dangerous determination. Desire sharpens into rebellion. The thought came to Lucy like a flash of lightning in the dark, and once it sparked, it refused to leave. For so long, he had carried a quiet jealousy of God's endless projects, of the way his attention was consumed, of the companion who was always at his side. That jealousy now burned hotter, twisting into something far more dangerous. Lucy longed to be what God was, to hold the same limitless powers, to shape and command without restraint. He hungered not only for authority, but for a partner, as beautiful as Sarai, or perhaps one even more dazzling. His desire was no longer innocent. It carried sharp edges of ambition and pride. In his mind, a vision began to take root, his own domain, his own realm to rule and govern, a kingdom where he sat in God's place. The envy that coiled within him whispered that it was possible if only he dared, and in that shadowed moment, a single treacherous whisper echoed in his heart.
Maybe I could be God.
Deception cloaked in comfort. Lucy stands amidst a circle of luminous beings. His presence radiates confidence as he speaks, his words weaving through the mist like music. Lucy began to whisper among the beings, planting seeds of doubt in the mist. He told them God had abandoned them, that his heart was no longer with them, that his attention had been stolen away by a new project. At first the beings resisted. Loyalty still anchored them. Yet they could not deny the ache of neglect that pulsed through the mist. So they listened, waiting to hear what Lucy might offer.
God no longer hears you. You call, but he does not answer. He sees your pain, but he does not respond. I will not be like him. I will not abandon you. I can be your God. I will listen when you cry out. I will answer when you are in need. I will give you freedom, and I will give you power. Why should we be left in his shadow, waiting endlessly for his attention? Together under me, we can be more. We can rise higher. We can build something greater than what he has given us. Follow me, and you will never be forgotten again.
He made promises he could not possibly keep. but in the silence of their discontent. His voice rang louder than truth. The betrayal rises. A crowd of beings assemble, their light dimmer than before, swaying under Lucy's influence. In the distance, God's presence begins to stir. While all of this was unfolding, a shift rippled through the mist. The vibrations grew heavy and intense until they jolted God from his project. Startled, he lifted his head, confusion in his eyes. Rising from his workspace, he followed the disturbance until he came upon a gathering. There, at the center, stood Lucy staking his claim. The crowd freezes as God appears at the edge of the gathering. His glow fills the mist, silencing whispers instantly.
What is going on here?
The crowd turned in shock. Surprise filled their faces. Surprise that he had appeared. And surprise because it felt as though he had caught them in the act. Lucy answered smoothly, his words laced with calculated ease.
Well, God, you have been gone for some time, and the beings have grown uneasy. I only thought perhaps I could step in while you were away.
God had already heard every word Lucy had spoken, yet he chose not to expose him before the others. To do so would make it seem as though discord had taken root, as if they were no longer in perfect unity. Instead, he replied evenly,
I'll take it from here. You are no longer needed.
Turning to the beings, God began to speak, his words steady and reassuring. As he addressed their worries, Lucy quietly slipped away, vanishing before the weight of God's presence could press against him. God was never quick to anger. He saw both sides of every situation, and in this moment, he did what he always did, restored balance. He calmed the beings, tended to their concerns, and re-established order in the realm. But though Lucy's schemes had been intercepted, his ambition did not die. In the shadows of his envy, he began to plot anew, searching for another way to claim what he had always desired. God and Lucy were the only ones who could disconnect from the mist. If they wished to hide their thoughts, they could use this power, and at times for other purposes as well. Lucy, knowing of the new earth, began to covet it for himself. He decided he would claim it and take a portion of the beings with him. While God continued his work, his awareness still open to the mist in case of any emergency, Lucy quietly constructed his plan. He would create a secret portal to Earth, a passage unknown to God. Through it, he intended to lead away as many beings as he could gather. Whispers spread first like seeds. Lucy told the beings they could be gods themselves, promising them powers beyond imagining. They were lies, every word of them. But Lucy was willing to say anything if it meant spiting God and gaining what he desired. The news rippled across the realm. Some were swayed, intrigued by the promises. Others were hesitant, troubled, or outright displeased. Yet Lucy knew he could not linger. He had to move quickly before God became aware of the treachery unfolding in his midst. Time moved differently in this realm. What passed for days or years in God's presence stretched into centuries on earth. To him, the flow of creation was steady, measured, and eternal. But below, humanity raced forward, marking ages with the rise and fall of kingdoms. God had been absorbed in his project for what, in Earth's measure, would be centuries. Each detail he shaped was timeless, crafted outside the pull of hours and seasons. Yet by the time Lucy resolved to flee with a portion of the beings, the Earth had already entered the 1900s. The ancient days of the Old and New Testament had passed into history. Now the world moved with a different rhythm. The hum of vehicles on crowded streets, the roar of airplanes cutting across the skies, the flicker of televisions casting their glow into living rooms, The world had grown modern, advancing at a pace foreign to the eternal realm. And into this shifting age, Lucy prepared to make his move. Sarai caught wind of Lucy's plan. Her first instinct was to run to God and warn him, to tear down the treachery before it could take root. But the ache in her heart stopped her. She loved God with every part of her being, yet she could not escape the sting of neglect. His promises had always been true, and still they felt further and further out of reach. Each day it seemed as though he was drawing away from her, pouring himself into his project while leaving her behind in silence. The longing in her heart twisted into doubt. Did he still love her as he once had? Or had she lost him to his new creation? In her desperation to know, Sarai resolved to test him. She sought out Lucy.
I do not trust you, but tell me of this plan. And understand this, Lucy, I have no desire to be with you in any way. I only want to go to Earth.
Lucy's eyes lit with a dangerous hunger. He had dreamed of this moment, not only to spite God, but to take what God cherished most. For Lucy's envy was not only for God's power. He desired Sarai herself. He had watched her with a covetous love, a love sharpened into obsession. He leaned closer, his voice smooth as the mist itself, wrapping around her doubts like a snare.
God has abandoned you.
He whispered.
He leaves you waiting, forgotten. But I will not. Come with me, and I will give you a new life. A life where you will never be overlooked, never be cast aside. Together we can be free. Together we can be greater than him.
What he did not tell her was the truth, that to follow him meant losing everything, even her memory of who she was. His promises were lies, spun only to wound God and to take for himself what had never belonged to him. Sarai hesitated. Her love for God warred with the gnawing ache of neglect. She did not believe Lucy, not truly. Yet her longing to know if God would come after her was stronger than her fear. Lucy pressed her with urgency, warning that there was little time left for him to carry out his plan. Faced with the choice, Sarai resolved to go, not because she trusted Lucy, but because she needed to know, to see if God still loved her enough to come after her. What Lucy did not tell Sarai was that in this new world, her memories would be erased, leaving her an entirely different being. It would be as if she had never existed. Every trace of her old life would vanish, every bond severed, making it impossible for anyone, even God, to find her. And Lucy kept this truth hidden, for it was the very thing he desired, to steal her away into a place where she would be lost forever. Sarai was gone. A heart-wrenching jolt seared through God's being, striking him like fire and forcing him to his feet. His eyes searched the vastness around him, and at once he cast himself into the mist, desperate for answers. Chaos met him there. He heard cries, felt waves of confusion, and saw ripples of unrest. And then absence, whole presences missing, beings he had formed, gone without a trace. But one he could sense. Lucy, he thought, his voice like thunder within himself. And then with dread, his mind turned to his beloved, Sarai. He reached for her presence, but nothing met him. No warmth, no thread in the mist to lead him back to her. She was gone, utterly gone. For the first time, the one who was ever calm, who saw every path before it unfolded, felt the stirrings of panic. He stilled himself, forcing his spirit into composure, but the ache within him burned. He pressed deeper into the mist, combing it with divine intensity, searching for anything, a fragment, a whisper, a trace, that would lead him to Sarai. Instead, he found Lucy. Their eyes locked, and God's glare cut sharper than any blade. Within the mist, he bound his voice so only Lucy could hear. No other being would know what passed between them.
Where is Sarai?
His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority and the sharp edge of warning, the unmistakable tone that said, "You know better than to play with me." By now, he had already uncovered the truth of Lucy's rebellion, that a third of the realm had followed him into the portal. Yet none of that mattered in this moment. Only Sarai mattered. Nothing else compared. Lucy smirked, his reply laced with venom and mockery.
My lord, I have no idea what you speak of. Is Sarai not in your company? Surely you of all always keep her in focus, never neglecting her.
It was the strike Lucy had long awaited to wound God where he was most tender. For once, Lucy's lies had found their mark. Rage unlike any the realm had known burned through God. His fury was absolute, his decree final. With a force that split the heavens, he cast Lucy down, hurling him into the depths of the earth, into a place unworthy of light, a realm of fire, brimstone, and unending torment.
Here is your kingdom,
God declared, his voice resounding with both wrath and judgment.
You are now lord over this place. You will govern it forever. This is what you sought. Rule over ashes.
God knew Lucy would never give him Sarai's whereabouts. And even if he desired to, he could not. For Sarai was no longer Sarai. She had become something else entirely, hidden beyond the reach of even God's own creation. When the judgment was spoken and Lucy was cast into the depths, silence fell across the realm. The mist, once alive with song and harmony, quivered with sorrow. A third of its light was gone, ripped away by betrayal, and Sarai was lost. God stood in the stillness, the ache of absence heavier than the void itself. Sarai's name lingered in his being, echoing like a wound that would not close. For the first time in eternity, the all-seeing could not see. The all-knowing could not find. It was as though half of himself had been torn away. He grieved, not in weakness, but in a depth that shook creation itself. The heavens dimmed, the mist wept with him. Yet grief was not all that stirred within him. Determination rose, fierce and unyielding. Sarai might be hidden, her essence transformed, but God's love for her was eternal. No distance, no deception, no veil of time or memory could sever what he had placed within her. And so, though the path would be long and shadowed, he resolved to search, to seek her across the ages, through every barrier, through every world. For God knew this: Sarai was not gone forever. She was hidden. And he would not rest until he found her. And so it was that God, carrying both grief and resolve, turned his gaze toward earth. Time below had raced forward, while he labored in eternity. Humanity now pulsed with invention and change. Cities alive with electricity, skies crossed by great machines, voices carried over invisible airwaves. The world was no longer ancient. It was modern, restless, and ever in motion. Into this age God descended, leaving the heavenly realm behind. His mission was clear: to find Sarai hidden somewhere in the folds of creation. His love for her blazed brighter than the sorrow of loss, pulling him step by step into the realm of men. And so his search began. It carried him through the noise and lights of earth, until at last it led him to a child, a little girl whose life was about to brush against the eternal. She would come to be known as Little Star, and that is where the meeting begins.